Is your computer acting up and you suspect that your hard drive or SSD might be dying? Well, today I'm going to show you not only how to diagnose that, but what you can do about it. Stay tuned. You know, there's nothing worse than having a hard drive fail on you, just for you to realize that you haven't backed up in a while. I've had this happen to me before, and because of it, I go to great lengths today to back up my data. In fact, my current backup procedure came as a result of about 10 years ago, on my birthday in fact. The data drive on my media center PC just flat out failed on me. That computer had thousands of movies and hundreds of hours of recorded TV that was just gone. But that wasn't the worst of it. It also had all of my pictures up to that point. Nothing was backed up, and the drive was completely dead. It's because of that incident that I now back up all of my systems to a file server on my network, and that file server is backed up to the cloud. So, no matter what happens, the risk of losing data is pretty unlikely. If everyone had a strict backup procedure in place, then it wouldn't really matter if your hard drive is dying or not. Unfortunately, not everyone does. In fact, very few people have a proper backup. For this reason, it might be a good idea to keep an eye on your storage device and make sure they're healthy. And that's what we're looking at today. But first, we gotta pay some bills. So check out today's sponsor. Is your copy of Windows 10 unactivated? Well, it doesn't have to be, because with today's sponsor, VIP SCD Key, you can get a valid Windows 10 license for under $20. Stop dealing with that stupid watermark on the desktop, the valid license for Windows 10. Also, with an activated copy of Windows 10, you can upgrade to Windows 11 for free. Just go to the link in the description below and pick up a valid Windows 10 license key. During checkout, use the code CYBERCPU for a 25% discount. Once you have your key, go to your activation settings in Windows 10 and click on the link that says Change Product Key. Enter the product key you just purchased and hit Activate. Now you don't have to deal with that stupid watermark that come with running an unactivated copy of Windows 10. Now, on with the video. So here's the thing. You're very rarely going to get a pop-up when you boot up telling you that your hard drive is failing. But ironically, there is a system in place that could make this happen. But unfortunately, most computer manufacturers disable this from the factory. Yes, your BIOS does have the ability to check your hard drive is failing, but in most cases, I've noticed that it's turned off in the BIOS. This system is called SMART. It's an acronym that stands for Self-Monitoring Analysis and Reporting Technology. This is essentially like a check engine light for your hard drive. In my opinion, and this is going to be a little conspiratorial here, the reason why I believe that manufacturers turn this off in the BIOS is because a failing hard drive still normally works. I mean, you might have degraded performance, and you might even have some data corruption, but for the most part, it'll boot into Windows, and the system will act somewhat normally. And here's where the conspiratorial part comes in. Because the hard drive will, in many cases, act normally, manufacturers will push you having problems into the future after, the warranty expires. So if you start getting warnings that your hard drive is failing before your warranty runs out, then the manufacturer has to give you a new hard drive. They don't want to do this. So turning the smart warnings off in the BIOS, they're kind of buying themselves a little bit of time before your hard drive fails completely. I mean, this is great for the manufacturer because they don't have to pay for a new hard drive for your system. But unfortunately, since you had no warnings that your drive was going to fail, you lost all your data. So the first thing I would do when you buy a new computer is go into the BIOS and turn on smart monitoring. However, even if the smart monitoring in the BIOS is turned off, there are still signs a computer can give you that a storage device is failing. Some of the most obvious ones are, random crashes or even blue screens. I'm not saying that every time your computer crashes or gets a blue screen that it means your hard drive is failing, but it's a good clue that that might be a problem. Also, if you're seeing a lot of corrupted files on your hard drive, that's a dead giveaway that there's a storage device that's failing. Files don't normally go corrupt for no reason. Also, if you're getting slower performance than usual, it can be a sign that your storage device is failing. If you've listened to me in previous videos, you won't be running a mechanical hard drive as your primary drive. However, it's still important to know how to check the health of a mechanical drive because they still make pretty decent data drives. So I'm going to show you how to check the health of a mechanical drive as well as an SSD. Let's start with the SSD because more than likely that's the kind of drive that you're currently using in your system. Now, when it comes to SSDs, they're a little harder to diagnose a failing drive. And this is because there's really no way to determine if a capacitor is about to blow or a controller is about to fail. Unfortunately, when it comes to semiconductors, sometimes they just fail without warning. So if your SSD is failing to detect, then unfortunately, you're past the point of detecting if a drive is about to fail because your drive has failed. Hopefully, you have a good backup. However, if your SSD is still being detected and you just want to check its health, then there's a few things that you can do. Let's go ahead and jump on the computer real quick, and I'll show you how to do it. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to need is a program that'll give you all of your hard drive health statistics. And the program that we're going to be using for that is a program called Crystal Disk Info. So let's go ahead and open Chrome up real quick, and I'll show you how to download it. I'll go ahead and leave a link in the description below for this program. It's a really good program, and this is essentially the industry standard when it comes to checking smart capabilities on your drive. So go ahead and go to the website, scroll down. We're going to pick the standard edition here, so go ahead and click on download. And then from download, there's a couple different ways you can download this. You can either download the zip file, which is essentially just a portable program, or you can download the installer and it will allow you to install the program on your system. I'm just going to get the portable installer right here, and that's the one I typically recommend using. I keep this on my thumb drive, and it's usually a really good way to be able to use it to be able to test other computers as well. So that's the one that I use. So I'm going to go ahead and extract this real quick. And then once we get it extracted, it's just going to take a second. We can minimize some of these folders while we're waiting for it to happen. And there we go. All right, so with Crystal Disk Info, we're going to go ahead and run the 64-bit version. That's the same one you should be using. Honestly, you shouldn't be using a 32-bit version of Windows anymore, so Disk Info 64 is probably the one that you're going to want to use. Go ahead and say yes to the user account control. And here we go. Now, this is the SSD that's currently installed in my system here. And as you can see right here for the health status, it says 84%. And the reason why it's at 84% is because SSD's health is pretty much determined by how many writes they've had. And on this one here, you can see the total host writes is 74,455. Now, that is a lot. And keep in mind that the hard drive that I'm currently using in this system was used when I put it in here in the first place. And it essentially has an operating system loaded on it almost every week, but it's still at 84%, so it's doing pretty good. Now you can go down here, and if you want, you can look at each attribute individually here, and if you know what you're looking at, then this is a way that you can use to be able to identify problems that your SSD is having. However, if you can't read a lot of these raw values, then it's real difficult to be able to get any real information for SSDs, that is, when it comes to the raw values specifically. However, you can look at the health status to see what percentage you're at, and you can see how many writes that your SSD has had. Now, one thing that really doesn't matter as much on SSDs is the power on hours, because with an SSD, as long as you're not writing all the time, the power on hours aren't quite as important. However, as you can see, this SSD has been running for 2 years and 351 days. So it's just about to cross its 3-year mark. So this one definitely has some life on it. It's been used a lot. So a lot of people are going to tell you that when it comes to SSDs, you want to be really, really careful not to write to them that often. And to be honest with you, I think that's kind of BS. And here's the reason why. As you can see from my SSD, I'm at 84%. Well, that's 84%, and you're right, that's cut down to almost 20% down on the life of that SSD. But keep in mind, I have these two SSDs right here. One of them has Windows 11 on it, and the other one has Windows 10 on it. These are essentially just ways that I store Windows 10 and 11 for my test system right here. So about every week, I will image a brand new copy of either Windows 11 or Windows 10 based on what operating system I need for the video. Now, I do this on a weekly basis, so this drive gets written to a lot. And I mean like way more than a standard SSD will. And it was a used SSD from the very beginning, so it's already had some life used on it. So based on that, 84% really isn't that bad because this SSD is heavily abused. But you know, like the thing is, with SSDs, like I said before, it's really difficult to diagnose a drive that's about to fail. For all of my love of SSDs, they do definitely have some downsides. One of those downsides is they typically run just as good as they've ever ran, all the way up until they don't. I mean, seriously, you can have an SSD that's working perfectly 1 second and is completely dead the next. Also, I've seen some of the weirdest problems with SSDs. I had a customer tell me one time that whenever they turn off their computer and come back to it the next day, all the things they did the day before were gone. When I went to look at this system, everything seemed to work fine. I created some documents, edited a few others, and then shut the system down. Then I turned it back on, and all the documents I had created were gone, and all the ones I had modified were back to the way they were before. In this situation, something had failed in the controller that essentially write protected the SSD. Luckily, it was really easy to back up because the data was all there. It just wouldn't let me create anything new or change anything that was on the system already. And you know, I had another customer who couldn't log into his computer. It would boot up fine, but it would get stuck on the login screen. No matter what we did, we could not get it to log on. On that one, it ultimately turned out that one of the NAND chips on the SSD had failed. Luckily, all the Windows system files that were on the other chip were working just fine. But his data was on the NAND chip that failed, and that one wasn't. Unfortunately, I couldn't recover any of the data on that one. So when it comes to SSDs, keeping your system backed up is extremely important because they can have some really weird failures. However, mechanical drives fail too, and sometimes their failures can be pretty strange as well. But the nice thing about mechanical drives is that because they're mechanical, we can sometimes get early signs that the drive is going to fail. So it's a lot easier to diagnose a failing spinning disk than it is an SSD. Some of the obvious signs you want to look for are your drive making unusual sounds, but it's not uncommon for a mechanical drive to make noise because, well, it's a mechanical drive. But ultimately, you know your own system and the sounds that it makes. And if you hear any strange clicks or grinding coming from the system, then it might be a sign that the mechanical drive is on its way out. However, if your drive isn't making any strange noises, let me show you how you can diagnose a mechanical drive by using smart data. First, we need to plug this old notebook hard drive in that's in the beginning stages of failing so I can show you exactly what we're looking at. Okay, so I've got this mechanical drive plugged in, and essentially it has nothing on it. This was an old customer drive that I pulled out of a notebook and replaced it with something else because obviously it's in its first stages of failing. So since we just plugged that in, we have to go ahead and close Crystal Disk Info. We're going to open it up again so it can redetect the drives. And as it opens up, you'll see here that we've got a caution. So the way Crystal Disk Info works is it'll give you all the different drives up on this top tab. So as you can see right here, we're still on the SSD. So if we click over, you can see that this one shows caution. And the reason why for the caution is it says the reallocated sector counts are at 1.4 million reallocated sectors. And that's pretty bad, actually. But if we go ahead and look through this drive, and let's go ahead and look and see what's actually happening. So as you can see, the warning right here is based on reallocated sector counts. And the raw value in this case really doesn't mean that much because honestly, it's saved in a way to where we can't really tell how many reallocated sectors there are. This just says 1600CO. So that number isn't quite as important as the fact that we do have reallocated sectors. But if we go over and hover over the caution, you can see right there, it shows us how many sectors are reallocated. But if we scroll down here, and we look at reallocation event count, we can also see that there's a raw value for that one too. And here's the thing when it comes to spinning disks, is the three most important data points within your smart data are going to be current pending sector count, reallocation event count, and the reallocated sector count. And the way this works is, first off, you have the current pending sector count. And the current pending sector count is the number of unstable sectors that are yet to be remapped. So essentially, the drive has found that there are some sectors on the drive that are unstable, and it needs to take a closer look at those. Now, once it determines that these sectors are bad, then we go to the reallocation event count. And what that means is this is the number of attempts that the drive has made in trying to reallocate these sectors. And then once the sectors are reallocated, then we go to the reallocated sector count. Now, here's the thing. I've mentioned a lot of statements here that probably don't make a lot of sense. And let me explain to you what these actually mean. First off, you have to understand how a spinning disk actually works. And essentially, the way they're set up is you have a spinning platter that's coated with an iron oxide. And that iron oxide is what gives it the magnetic properties that a hard drive typically has. Well, if you've ever had a car that was rusty and you ran your fingernail across it and you had all that little rust dust fall off of it, that's iron oxide. Well, if you ever have damage to the surface of a platter on a disk, that damage on that surface is what we're talking about right here. So first off, you're going to have the pending sector count is essentially going to be the hard drive noticing that, this sector might be bad. I need to look at it a little bit closer. And then once it determines that it's bad, then it goes to the reallocated event count, which is essentially the hard drive trying to save whatever data is on that sector, if it's savable, so that it can reallocate it to an area of the hard drive that's set aside just for reallocated sectors. And then once it does get reallocated, then the hard drive essentially is a change of address. So like for instance, if you have a neighborhood that has 5 houses and one house burns down, you don't just change the addresses to all the houses. You actually have a change of address for that house. So it works the same way with hard drive sectors. If a sector goes bad, it's marked as bad and then it's reallocated to another part of the drive so that the drive still has a functional addressing system for each sector in the drive. So as you can see, a mechanical drive is much easier to diagnose long before it fails completely. That is, of course, if it's failing because of a surface issue. I mean, a mechanical drive can still fail for electric issues. I mean, you can burn out a controller just as easy on a mechanical drive as you can on an SSD. So if something like that happens, then, well, you can have a failure immediately. So let's say you have a failing drive in your system. What do you do about it? Well, this all depends on how far its failure has gotten. If you're simply showing a caution, then you have a little bit of time. However, don't take advantage of that time, because I've had drives in my own systems that were flagged with caution that only lasted a couple of days. And I've had others that have lasted years. So if your drive is currently in a caution, then I would immediately clone it to a new drive. Chances are you'll get a pretty good clone of it and your system should run fine with the new drive. And keep in mind, if the drive you're replacing is a mechanical drive, then this is a great opportunity to upgrade to an SSD. Whatever you do, don't replace a spinning disk with another spinning disk. Now, alternatively, if your drive isn't showing caution, but it's showing bad in Crystal Disk Info, then I highly recommend against trying to clone it. Once the drive has gotten to this state, unfortunately, its health has degraded to the point to where stresses put on the drive trying to clone it could make it simply fail completely. So the first thing that I would do is boot your system from either a live Linux distro or a USB like Heron's boot CD, and then back your data up. I would highly recommend starting with the most important data first and then moving to less important data until you get a complete backup. Then, if the drive is functional after you back it up, then you can give it a shot cloning it. But unfortunately though, I haven't had much success in cloning a drive once it hits that stage. But it's at least worth a try. So, you don't have to reload Windows. Again though, I highly recommend if you're replacing your hard drive, replace it. Replace it with an SSD. Now, at this point in the video, I need to reiterate the point that I made at the beginning of the video. Having a hard drive fail sucks. It's about the worst feeling of using a computer today. Having all your hard work, your precious memories of your life and family and photographs just gone forever. So don't allow a failed hard drive to teach you the lesson that you need a backup. Just start backing up your data now. So let's jump back on the computer real quick, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to set up an unattended backup. Okay, so we're just going to use this bad hard drive here, but don't use a bad hard drive on your own system. So for us right now, we're going to use this volume right here. This is the spinning disk that I was using as an example. Windows 10 and Windows 11 are a little bit different, but let me show you how to do it in Windows 11. Go ahead and click the Start button, search for Control Panel. From Control Panel, in the search up here, you want to search for File History. Then once you find it, you go ahead and click on that. And then once File History is open, you want to go ahead and click on Select Drive. And then from there, select the drive that you want to use and hit OK. Chances are you're not going to get this error. The reason why I'm getting it is because I went through and did this prior to making this video. So if that happens, just go ahead and hit no. And then it's going to go ahead and set that drive and it's turned on. And at this point, it should start backing up your personal data. And if we go over, I'm going to go ahead and open up this drive real quick. And once you see, we'll have a folder here called File History. And in this folder, we'll have a bunch of different subfolders. And in there, you'll have all of your data. And as you can see, we'll go ahead and go into downloads, and there's the crystal disk info that we downloaded before. So as you can see, it's not hard setting up a backup. However, I definitely recommend against using a mechanical drive that's on its last legs like I did in this example. However, you could use a mechanical drive as a backup drive, or get yourself a little USB hard drive that you can just plug into the back of your system. Now, you don't have to use file history like I did, but it's convenient and it's free. But you don't have to get crazy as I do by using a file server and cloud backups and things of that nature. For the vast majority of catastrophes, a simple backup drive is all you really need. However, keep in mind that a backup drive is just as susceptible to failing as a hard drive in your computer. So if you're keeping track of the health of your hard drive or SSD, then make sure you keep an eye on your backup drive too. But if you do want to get crazy and build yourself a file server like I have a really old video I did right here where I show you how to build a NAS out of used components. Go easy on me on that video. I had just started my YouTube channel and I was still a little camera shy. Anyway, you guys have a great day.